Welcome everybody back to another episode of In the Grid with Ingrid. Now in this one, oh my gosh, I did it the exact same thing I did. This one is I still haven't finished the grid. I'm working on it right now. So that's what this episode, I'm going to be painting on the Bing grid, making it look all nice and pretty. And then we're going to talk about something very important to me while we do that, while we work. All right, and this is just something I feel like people need to know this information. You can't be a listener of In the Grid without knowing this and understanding this concept. All right, I'm going to be talking about the moon and why we can see it during the day. All right, just because I've come across a surprising amount of people in my life that do not know, they don't understand why we can see the moon during the day, or they just genuinely didn't know that the moon does not only come out at night. And I don't want my listeners to live in ignorance anymore. And I blame our public school system for failing to teach us this very simple concept. It truly is a very simple concept to wrap your head around. I don't know why they didn't teach us in school, but here we are, living in a world with a bunch of people who think that the moon is only supposed to be out at night. No, it concerns me. It really does concern me when I come across someone who just doesn't know. Or they think that the moon is not supposed to be there during the day. It really, truly bothers me. Oh my gosh. Anyways, so I'm going to explain why we can see the moon during the day and how it got there and all this fun stuff. Because, again, I cannot let my listeners be stupid. It can't happen. All right, it can't happen. So let me just dive right into it, okay? Let's first talk about why the moon is even out in the, not like why we can see it, but why it's even there during the day. How'd it get there? What's it doing there? Well, just like the sun, the moon acts in the same sort of way where it rises and sets in our sky. Now again, it appears to rise and set in our sky because of how things work. How we see the sun rise and set, but the sun's not actually moving, the earth is the thing that's moving. Well, it's kind of the idea too with the moon, but the moon's orbiting. It's whatever, okay? I'm getting too off topic, it's getting too confusing, when really this shouldn't be that confusing. So let me just back up. The moon rises and sets in our sky just like the sun does, all right? And now let's talk more about the sun, because if you can understand the sun, how the way the sun works, then you can understand the moon. Because it's literally the same thing, guys. It's literally, you'll see. So we can all agree, the sun rises and sets at different times throughout the year. Now, okay, maybe we didn't realize that, but let me consider the seasons, the 4 seasons of the year. We all know that during the summertime, the sun will rise earlier in the day and it'll set later. So it's in our sky for longer. We have longer days and shorter nights during the summer. And during the winter, we have shorter days and longer nights. The sun rises later on in the morning and it sets really early. I don't know if you've seen people talk about seasonal depression and this thing where the days are shorter, the sun's not out as long, they get depressed and blah, blah, blah. All this fun stuff happens in the winter, right? But you guys realize different seasons throughout the year calls for a different time when the sun comes up and when the sun goes down. Now, relatively speaking, it's all around kind of the same area. We all consider 5 o'clock in the morning, AM, PM, but for the most part, we can all agree that the sun will rise and set at different times depending on the season. And that's because it depends on where the Earth is in its orbit around the sun. The Earth takes 365 days to orbit around the sun, right? And depending on where we are in that orbit, that determines the season that we're in, right? Now, what causes the seasons is the tilt of the Earth. The Earth is on an axis, so that's what causes the seasons, but I'm not talking about what causes the seasons. I'm just saying there are seasons, and at different times throughout our orbit, we're in a different season. It just depends on where we are in our orbit around the sun. That one big circle that takes 365 days depends on where we are in that circle, and that determines when the sun will rise and set. Well, just like we have seasons, the moon has phases. Think of the phases of the moon in the same way you think about the seasons of the Earth. The phases of the moon are determined by the position the moon is in its orbit around Earth. The moon orbits the Earth, and depending on where it is in that orbit, it's in a certain phase, just like our seasons, right? The phases of the moon are like the seasons of Earth. Now, the moon's orbit doesn't take 365 days. It does not take the moon 365 days to go around the Earth. It only takes it around 28 days, around a month. So, it goes through its phases quicker than we go through our seasons. All right? But, again, just like the sun rising and setting depending on the season, the moon rises and sets at different times throughout the day depending on its phase. For a full moon phase, a full moon will rise at 6 p.m. and set at 6 a.m. Now that's nighttime. A full moon is only visible during the nighttime, usually speaking. And for a new moon is more like you can't see the moon at all in our sky, not even during the day. But a new moon phase will rise at 6 a.m. and set at 6 p.m. That's during the day. 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. That's the daylight. That's daytime. So, again, just really cool. Just to sum up, the moon will rise and set at different times in the day depending on its phase. So that's why you get the moon sometimes during the day and sometimes you get the moon only at night, or sometimes you get the moon, you can see it during the day and during the night. It all depends on its phase and where it is. All right. Sorry, my phone said no storage, but oh wait, let me hold my mic. So, pick up where we left off. It all depends on its phase when it rises and sets, the moon, right? Cool. Now, I talked about the new moon phase and how it rises and sets during the day, but we still can't see it. Why can't we see it? If I'm here sitting claiming that we can see the moon during the day and that's okay and it's not crazy and that's just how it works, then how come we can't see a new moon? We can't see a new moon because of its position in its orbit, like in relation to the sun, Earth, and moon. Like, when the moon is in its new moon phase, it's in between the Earth and the sun. Like, picture, and because it's in between the Earth and the sun, then the light that's being, like, the sun's light that's being shined on the surface of the moon, shown on the surface of the moon, that's not getting reflected back to us, is it? Because it's in front of us. The moon is in front of us, and it's not reflecting. Like, picture this. Picture you're on a stage, and there's a spotlight shining directly in your face. Like, your face is, the spotlight's shining directly in your face. Now imagine someone comes along and stands right in front of you, and they are also facing the spotlight. They are also facing the spotlight. You can't see what their face looks like, can you? You know they're there because they're blocking the spotlight. But you can't see their face because you're on the other side. You're on the side that's not being lit up. you're looking at the side that's not being lit up. That's what the new moon is. The new moon will come along. It'll come right in front of the earth, and we can't see it because we're not facing the side that's being lit up, are we? The side that's being lit up by the sun is getting reflected back towards the sun. It's just on the wrong side. So that's why we can't see it during the day. But when that moon moves a little more along in its orbit, then we can see it again. And it'll appear as a crescent shape. And we can see crescent-shaped moons during the day. And we can see them at night. It's all just circumstantial. But yeah, so that's why even though the moon is there during the day, during a new moon phase, we just can't see it because it's just in the weird position that it's in. We just can't see it. But now, take the same concept I was talking about. I don't think I've covered this yet because I'm getting thrown for a loop, the whole storage thing. Like, I had to stop in the middle of I was on a roll with my explanation, and I had to stop, delete some stuff, and come back, and I don't know what I covered and what I didn't. I think I'm going to cover now, like, why we can even see the moon during the day. Like, okay, we know why it's there, how it got there, its phases. Okay, cool. Why can we still see it then? We can still see it during the day because I genuinely think I need to look back right now and see if I'm repeating myself or not. Let me quickly... Okay, we're back again. I did not cover this, so I'm going to talk about it now. So, why can we even see the moon in the day? If we can't see the stars, how come we can see the moon? Well, first, let's ask ourselves, why can we see the moon during night? Why can we see the moon during the night? Well, it's being lit up by the sun. The sun is shining its light on the surface of the moon, and that light is getting reflected back to us on Earth. It's being lit up. It's like we're shining a flashlight on something. We can see it. Because the sun, it's literally like you're shining a flashlight on something. Like, if you shine your flashlight on a soccer ball, you can now see the soccer ball. Is the soccer ball producing its own light? No, it's a soccer ball. You're seeing the light being reflected back towards you from the flashlight. So, the same thing happens with the moon during the night. The sun is still shining on the moon. Even though we can't see the sun's still shining. It's not like we just turned it off, right? Because remember, again, when it's daytime for us, on the other side of the earth, it'll be nighttime for whoever's on the other side of the earth from you, you know? So it doesn't just turn off. The sun is always shining, and it's shining on the moon. And the moons and that light gets reflected back to us. So that's why we can see the moon during the night. It's the same exact reason why we can see the moon during the day. The sun is shining its light, it's hitting the surface of the moon, and it's being reflected back to us on Earth. And because, and I think this is like the logical explanation in my mind, we can still see the moon in the daytime, even though it's not as bright. We can still see it because of its close distance to us. Like, the planets, we can't see those during the daytime, usually speaking. You can sometimes see Venus right at sunset and dusk, but usually speaking, we can't see the planets during the day. So how come we can see the moon but not the planets? Well, the planets are farther away. They're just farther away. And so although the sun is shining its light on them and that light is being reflected back to us, the sun is drowning them out. The sun is just much brighter. Just like how you can't see stars during the day. You can't see stars during the day because they're getting drowned out by how bright the sun is. You know what I mean? You can see the stars at night, and you can see the stars at night because they're producing their own light. That's the difference between the stars and the moon and the planets. The stars in our night sky are producing their own light. It's not the sun that's shining on them and that's getting reflected back to us. No, they're just producing their own light. They're burning their own gas, just like our sun does. So we can see them when it's dark. When our sun is not visible in our sky, we can see the other stars that are producing light. And we can see the moon, because the moon's being lit up by the sun. And we can see planets, because the planets are being lit up by the sun. So that's just how light works. We can see the moon during the day because it's just getting lit up. And obviously it's not as bright as it would be at night because, again, the sun is so much brighter during the day, so it's just getting drowned out. But yeah, that's basically it, guys. Now you guys know. Now, just to sum up, again, very quickly, so we can recap, just a quick recap. 1, the time when the moon will rise and set in our sky depends on what phase it's in. And if the phase it'll rise and set at different times during different phases of the moon. That's just how it works. And the reason we can see it during the day is that it's being lit up by the sun, and that light is being reflected back to us. It's pretty cool. Now, I'm just going to point out, I know I've been saying it's the same thing as how, like, the seasons and the sun setting at different times is the same thing as the moon rising and setting at different times. And it's the same concept. That's the key word there. It's the same concept. But it's important to remember the key difference between the two situations. The key difference between the two situations is that the moon orbits Earth and the Earth orbits the sun. So, like, we get the sun rising at different times because the Earth is orbiting the sun, and we get the moon rising at different times because the moon is orbiting the Earth. Like, okay, because let's just say that the stupid people are right. That the moon is only out at night. Let's just picture this day, this scenario. The sun rises at 6 a.m. and sets at 6 p.m. And then the moon will rise at 6 p.m. and set at 6 a.m. So they're complete opposite of each other. The sun rises and then the moon, but you'll never see them together. By that logic, that would mean that wouldn't we be orbiting the moon? Right? I mean, there would be slight differences between the rising and setting, just like there's slight differences throughout the year of the sun rising and setting. But for the most part, we can all agree that the sun rises roughly around the same time all year and sets around roughly the same time throughout the year, right? We know that, like, 12 o'clock noon is when the sun's directly above us, and we know that, like, around 6 p.m. the sun is setting or is already set, or, we know typically when it's, like, early in the morning and early at night. Like, the moon has a much rapid change. It's not, it goes from rising at 6 a.m. to rising at 6 p.m. only like a couple weeks later. That's a 12-hour difference. 12 hours. That's a big difference compared to the sun's different times, right? It's different for the sun. It rises and sets at different times, but for the most part, there's like a small little chunk of time where it will that's when the sun usually rises and that's when the sun usually sets. You can't say that for the moon. You can't say the same thing for the moon, because the moon is rising and setting at all different times of the day. It rises at 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., and then a couple days later, it'll rise at 8 a.m. and set at 8 p.m. That's already a big difference. And then maybe a week later, it'll rise at 9 p.m. and set at 9 a.m. Those are big differences. And the reason that there's so much bigger of a difference in change of when it rises and sets is because the moon is orbiting us and we aren't orbiting the moon. That's why it's so stupid to think that it will only rise at night. No, it doesn't. It just doesn't. That's not how it works. It's not how it works. All right, so you can apply the same concepts. The same concept of depending on the season, that's what determines the time. That's the same concept. But the key difference is just based in the fact that the moon orbits us rather than the Earth orbiting the moon. So if you can just be comfortable with 3 things, wrap your head around 3 things. 1, that the moon orbits the Earth. 2, that the light from the sun is shining on the moon and that light gets reflected back to us, and that's why we can see it. It's being shot like a light bulb or a flashlight. It's just shining on the moon. That's why we can see it. If you can be comfortable with that. And 3, the last thing you need to be comfortable with and understand is the fact that, again, I've said this so many times, I'm going to say it again, the moon will rise and set at different times of the day depending on its phase. Those are the 3 things that you just really, if you can understand those 3 things, then you know why the moon is out in the daytime. Congrats. Congrats. You're smarter than a number of people I've come across now who don't know those 3 things, who don't understand those 3 concepts, those 3 ideas. If you can understand those 3 things, then you can continue listening to my podcast, all right? I can't have listeners who think the moon is only out at night. That just can't happen. I'm sorry. No. We are taking out the stupid people in this world, one at a time, by teaching them why the moon is out in the day. So if you come across someone, a stupid person, doesn't understand, show them this episode. Alright? Show them this episode. You know, I do truly blame our public education system for not teaching this. I feel like it's pretty simple. It's not that hard to grasp. I could have grasped this concept as a 3rd grader. If we can grasp the seasons, then we can grasp the phases of the moon. It's just how it... Alright? But I also kind of blame the whole, like, the sun represents day and the moon represents night. Like, I get why we come to those, like, representations of the night sky and the daytime sky. I get it. It's logical, and, it is logical to say that the moon represents the night. But because of that, it has led to more people completely misunderstanding and completely, like, just thinking that the moon is not supposed to be out at day. I heard someone say, "Why is the moon out at the daytime? I thought it's only supposed to be out at night. Why? That's so weird." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, no! It's not weird. It's not weird. We think it's weird because we always associate the moon with nighttime. And really, we should kind of stop doing that. I don't see why we can't just associate the night sky with stars rather than just the moon, because the moon is out all the time during the day and night. Like, it's always moving, changing, like, but I know that's not going to change, and we're just going to keep associating night with the moon. But just be aware. Just be aware of the fact that that idea's kind of stupid. Because it's not only out at night. It's misleading. The idea is misleading. But, so just be aware of the fact that it's misleading. And you'll be fine, guys. You'll be fine. Alright. Anyways. Just wait till I explain eclipses. That's when it gets really fun with the moon. Oh my gosh. That whole thing with the spotlight, that example of the person covering spotlight in front when they stand in front of you, yeah, that's how a solar eclipse works. Basically, in the most basic terms, that's how a solar eclipse works. We'll get there later. For now, I'm gonna get back to finishing up my Bing grid, and have a great day or night or week or whatever, guys, all right? Bye. Have fun.